started the Eminent Women series, which recognizes these marvelous women whose lives and stories can inspire all of us. Fortunately, today we have amongst us Dr. Swati Piramal, a global influencer, entrepreneur, philanthropist, born with a green thumb, culinary artist, author, and the art collector. She sure is a fountain of creativity. Swatiji is a public health specialist and a distinguished alumnus of the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. Very spiritual in nature, to quote her. The aim of the deepest knowledge, according to the Gita, is the knowledge of self. Her zest for life and her ability to reinvent herself is truly remarkable and inspirational. Thank you so much, Dr. Swati Piramal, for accepting our invitation and gracing us with your presence. Before we begin, I would like to invite Wikiflow's 37th National President, Mrs. Jahanvi Phukan, to give the welcome address. Jahanvi is an entrepreneur, a co-founder of two national tourism award-winning companies, Jungle Travel India and Assam Bengal Navigation Company under JTI Group. Her companies are encompassed in travel and hospitality, boutique river cruising, small group or specialized stores, tea and textiles, all of which empower young people's livelihoods, especially women and their communities. As president of Flow, Janvi's focus is on sustainable livelihood for women economic empowerment. Over to you, Janvi.
Yeah. Namaste. A very warm welcome to our Flow Eminent Women series. Dr. Piramal. On behalf of Flow, the women's wing of FICCI, I'm delighted to welcome you today as its 37th National President and the first from Northeast chapter. Dr. Piramal, Flow is the oldest chamber of commerce for women in South Asia. We are the collective voice of entrepreneurs, businesswomen, professionals, and the like, spread across 17 chapters pan-India, as well as the voice of those women whose lives we have impacted, directly or indirectly over the decades. This year, the Eminent Women series has been initiated to honor women who have stamped their footprint in history on their own merit. Dr. Piramal, you are amongst India's leading scientists and industrialists whose contributions to innovation, new medicines, and public health services have touched countless lives. You are the recipient of the Padma Shri, the Lotus Award for Leadership and Philanthropy in New York, the Global Empowerment Award in the UK, and one of France's highest awards, the Knight of the Order of Merit for Medicine and Trade. Yet in the mid-70s, as a young medical student in Mumbai, you had seen a 4-year-old child on crutches. That child had polio, a preventable yet widespread disease then. Dr. Swati Piramal, you later set up the Gopi Krishna Piramal Hospital in Mumbai with your father-in-law's blessings to take up your first battle against polio. That disease, you said, was so preventable yet so widespread. And over the last 3 decades, you have worked relentlessly towards the prevention of diseases such as diabetes, osteoporosis, malaria, tuberculosis, epilepsy, arthritis, and heart diseases. What makes your story truly inspirational is the way you have battled the odds to rewrite the story of your life with your running mate, and from the bottom to the boardroom on your own merit. You married into a traditional industrialist family. You finished your MBBS degree after you got married. You started a hospital with your father-in-law's support. And you went on to study public policy in Harvard University at age 37. And you left 2 young children behind to do so. So that's what makes you so different and so inspirational, that you've had this traditional setup and yet you've done so much. So that is why we at Flow are so looking forward to your story. And we know now that the rest is history, but you are still writing it. So I want to mention here that in 2012, you were elected as the member of the Harvard Board of Overseers. And you served on the board until I understand you were told that nobody from India had ever won. In fact, US President Barack Obama and Robert Kennedy too had lost when they had stood for the same elections. Yet you did India proud, and you became their first board member from India, and also served as the Dean's advisor to Harvard Business School and Public Health. So that is what it takes to be a leader, a doer, and such an inspiration for women. That is why Flo is so happy that under this Eminent Women series, we get an opportunity to speak with you today. So, as a token of our appreciation, we have a small video to play for you and a virtual memento for you. So, may I request Vicky IT to please share that on the screen for Dr. Piramal.
I'd rather be a sparrow than a snail. Yes, I would. If I could, I should. Rather be a hammer than a nail. Yes, I would. If I only could, I should. Oh, I'd rather sail away like a song that's here and gone. A man.
So,
Tracing her inspirations through her writings, all of them echo to two key forces: perseverance and diligence. She opines what she has done is just a drop in the ocean. What remains to be done is still huge. May I now invite Dr. Swati, the celebrated woman with Renaissance temperament, a healer, and an entrepreneur who synergizes all of her interests, passions, and expertise to create significant change. As a public health specialist and a distinguished alumnus of Harvard Chan School of Public Health, she will present the 5 pillars of public health to reboot the economy after COVID-19. Respected Swati ji, over to you now.
President of FLO, Janabi Furkan, Mannat Kothari, the chairperson of FLO Ludhiana, Pragya Sabu Shah, my niece, because of whom I'm here. She persuaded me to talk to you. I thank you for inviting me, and a very warm welcome to everyone who's spending time. I'm so happy to do this because then I don't have to go chapter by chapter and travel to all these chapters. I have so many standing invitations. And I always say on my next trip, I'll come to Calcutta or Jaipur or Delhi. But here it's so nice in this virtual world, you can do it right from home. I want to get right into it. So my presentation is in 2 parts. The first is I want to talk about the idea of self-realization and how I do things. And the second, I will do what is my Swadharma, which is public health, and give you a little curated view of what I think about COVID-19 and what will happen to reboot the economy. And I update this presentation every week because it changes. Last week, I spoke to CII, spoke to Bombay Chamber of Commerce, and it's different this week because things are moving so quickly that we are able to only keep up with the pace of scientific development. So may I have the screen share, please? Yes, so I made this presentation, as I was saying, for July, because it has changed every week. Thank you again for doing this for me, and I'm going to reflect on how I do things. What happened was that LinkedIn, which is a global influencer, asked me to write on the topic of how I do things. And I thought that's, I really didn't know how I do things. And I asked, it was better to ask other people who have worked with me in the past, sometimes in a career spanning 35 years, on what they thought was my method of working. So I asked my school friends, college friends, medical classmates, my teachers at Harvard, my work colleagues, how do I do things? And I collated their answer, and then I asked a graphic artist to illustrate them. And I think today I'm going to use that arts illustration to explain. So reflection is an important part of learning in Indian philosophy. Self-realization is one of life's goals. This philosophy is based on India's ancient culture, where jnana, karma, and bhakti are the center of values in life and work. So I wanted to know, did I walk the talk? Did people feel around me that I was living my values? Could I carry my values across cultures and across countries and a wide variety of institutions? Was I able to work with colleagues and also peers? Could I take both success and failure in my stride? And how could I cross the hurdles? And did I increase my knowledge and act on it with care? So I had all these questions in my mind. And so here were some of the answers, and here are some of the graphics that you can see. So the first one I have owed to my mother, because she always said, delete the D of depression from your vocabulary. She said, always be positive, always move forward. And she always continuously even tells me that today. She's right here with me, staying with me during the lockdown in the last week or so. And then she continuously emphasizes that even in these times of crisis, you have to move forward, you have to delete the D of depression. So my parents taught me positivity, and they continuously emphasize this throughout my life. The other thing is a love for empathy and positivity, making a difference to care about the world. So it's important not only to do well, but also to do good and make the world a joyful, beautiful, and healthy place. At the back of this graphic, you can see Mother Teresa. It was my encounter with her. One day she came to my clinic with Father Joe Pereira, who I'll talk about a bit later. And she entered the place and she saw the children that I was working with. Most of them had poliomyelitis, they couldn't walk. And she told me that, share this joy of the suffering children that you are serving and share this joy with everybody that you meet. And here is a picture of her when she came to my home the same day. And that evening, we went to a new center in Vasai, which she was opening. And for the first time, I have seen a miracle happen because she was in the car at the back and there was a long line of traffic. We were already late for the opening. And she said, I'm going to start to pray. And I wondered, how is this traffic going to go away when she starts to pray? A scientist, it doesn't make any sense. But she did that, and within minutes, the whole traffic went away. And she explained, another story where she said, I didn't have any milk powder for my children who were suffering, and I prayed, and that day somebody gave me a 50 kilo sack of milk powder. So prayer, she said, is very powerful, and that it helps in treating the suffering children that you are talking about. The second idea is action, because action is taking your knowledge and seeing a deeper understanding of the knowledge. If you use the action with knowledge, the jnana, and you have relentless hard work, is a key to innovation and achievement. You immerse yourself in knowledge. When I became the president of ASSOCHAM, it was the first woman president in all the chambers of commerce. After that, both FICCI and CII had women presidents. So I'll share a little secret that I never went anywhere without reading 1,000 pages on a subject. I'm a trained doctor. I didn't know much about the economy, nuclear medicine, nuclear energy, highways, and things like that, iron and steel or anything. And I would learn 1,000 pages before I opened my mouth. It was a very good way because it was the armor of knowledge which you went into any room and nobody could dispute it because you had all the facts over there. So it's a small secret, but the importance of jnana as an armor. So apply your imagination. Creativity is moving and inspiring. If you have to make a presentation like this and you just use bullet points and then you don't make it creative, people don't pay attention. And so I think applying imagination is vital to move and inspire and touch the hearts of people. So if you find a new way of doing anything, whether it's a brochure or you're designing a menu at home or you invited people at home, why not look at the art of gathering and think how you can be creative and how you can serve that person. And that creates a magical, intangible way to go forward. So I used creativity when I wrote this book. It was called Light Has Come to Me. You see Pandit Jasraj. I made him sing. This was a management book on the Gita. And Pandit Jasraj sang in his fantastic voice the verses in 18 different ragas. And it was such a wonderful way of explaining an abstract idea with music. And so creativity helps you go straight to the heart. I was launching a product for the skin, and then I encountered this picture of Audrey Hepburn. And I realized that the photographer had given this picture to Harvard University, which I was on the board of. So I went into the archives, I licensed it, and I used it on my packaging. So it was a very creative way, rather than having a plain product picture, to have something which stood the test of time. And Audrey Hepburn, of course, is an iconic figure and a woman entrepreneur who just spoke so many things about women's issues. One of the things that Nitin Noria, who is the Harvard Business School dean, taught me, he's a businessman. He teaches big businesses. And he said that when you want to communicate, use the arts and use music, use dance, use storytelling, use any way you can to convey a sublime experience. And that reaches straight to the heart. I've never forgotten that idea, because then in every presentation, I try to use the arts. This man was a professor when I was a student at Harvard, and he taught us how to use radio. In 20 seconds, how do you convey your message? And he was the advisor to President Lyndon Johnson. And he taught us so quickly and so beautifully that communication can be really to the point. It is a lifelong learning. It is a skill that I tell every young woman that she must have. Even Warren Buffett said that it is a lifelong skill that you can learn, the art of public speaking, the art of communication, and use that effectively. So I was, as President said, I was 37 years old, I had 2 children, and we had to compete to become commencement speaker at Harvard. And here I was speaking in one of the most illustrious, occasions is commencement. I was a small Indian woman, not very tall, and all the people were taller than me, stronger than me, and I thought much more intelligent than me. And yet, using the skills that I learned at the university, I could actually manage to speak at the commencement. So respecting all cultures, learning and constantly learning, building partnerships that prosper, being an entrepreneur and being a pioneer. Today in the world of digital learning, you can learn from the best people around the world. This week, I'm taking 2 courses at Ashoka University, 2 in Oxford University, 1 in Stanford. And my gosh, you can learn from the top people in the world, the best subject. And it's very low cost. So I think digital education and meeting and all these new 5G platforms is just going to open up the world of education to something that we've never seen before. And that world is so exciting and so riveting of how we can even apply it to small children. One of the things that I love to do was science. And you mentioned the Chevalier Award, which the French minister gave me. Now, Chevalier means chivalry, right? So it is the idea of chivalry. And if you look at the female who is on the rupee, or not on the rupee, on the currency, the French franc, is Marianne, who is the equality and justice, the lady who signifies that. And I was so pleased that I could help in these two areas for women's empowerment. So this was the Chevalier Award, the Padma Shri and others, but all of them, I think, were in some way rewarding me for the empowerment of women. And that, I think, was really very pleasant. With ASSOCHAM being the first woman leader, I met 40 leaders of state. And it was the most wonderful experience of my life when I can meet every president or every senior person from other countries in 1 year. And that I think is something that was such a fantastic moment where I could then meet everyone and then learn from them. So loving science was something that was always innate. I think it came from my father, who taught me mathematics and science at a very early age. And he taught me the love of reading. And he just kept on saying girls should read. And therefore, Harvard University for me was an aspiration, which I never thought I'd do after I got married and had 2 children. But I went when I was 37. I had 2 kids, and a joint family is very useful at that time. My sisters-in-law and mother-in-law looked after my children while I was studying, and they let me have the freedom to go abroad and do whatever I dreamt of doing. Because of science, I met again leaders from around the world, ministers, prime ministers, and then I opened my own research center, which had over 500 scientists trying to discover new drugs. So science tells you about the universe. It is using knowledge as the key, relentless hard work is the key to achievement, and you have to believe in innovation. Today, COVID-19 has, and I'll speak a little bit later on that, is the fountain of innovation. So with this R&D, we started in many countries around the world. In Canada, this one is in Berlin. We started it in many, many countries around the world. It was a pleasure to work with and meet so many scientists across the globe. For me, spirituality is central in using your values in everything you do. The deep knowledge of spirituality and the Vedas help you to live a full and joyful life. When my son was young, he went to Venice, and there he met a teacher, and he said, "Wow, look at St. Mark's Square, it's so beautiful." And she told him, "No, you have the treasure chest in your own country. Go back and learn it." So he came back and said, "Mom, Dad, I want to learn the Gita with you." And we did that over the next 17 years. And every week we still learn about the Gita and the Upanishads and this fountain of treasure that we have in our own country, which can help us live our values in a full and joyful life. This is Swami Tejoy who is the head of the Chinmaya Mission, Guru B.K.S. Iyengar, who was the fountainhead of teaching yoga. This is Swami Satwik Ji, who's a teacher today, even for the last 17 years on our Gita, and Pandit Jasraj, whose melodious voice crosses and touches the heart. In life, you have to plan every detail meticulously, and then you have to execute it. And you build your grand plan in life around the values that you have. And this should be like a hula hoop, where you are the center and the values are revolving around you. And in everything you do, you have to live this principled life, this value-based life, and that makes a huge difference. One of the things that I love to do is love for gardens. It makes me joyful in everything you do, helps me to have humor. Gardens and blooming flowers bring peace and prosperity and harmony. So I opened this first garden 2 years ago at the Chelsea Flower Show. And this flower you see, this blue flower, is called the Himalayan blue poppy. It exists in India at 10,000 square feet above sea level. And it grows only a few places in Northeast India. That flower I could bring to England and then presented it as the blue colors of the Indian cricket team. We even had the World Cup in the picture, and then did it with exquisite Pietra Dura from Jaipur. And it obviously won a big medal because nobody had taken that much trouble to have this amazing garden from India. So after that, I was really stuck into gardens. I use metaphors from the Chelsea Flower Show to have flower shows in Mumbai. We had 50,000 people coming per day to explore these wonderful flowers, which all had themes of different things. And it was the most wonderful time to make the gardens. Yesterday, while I was taking the course, I came across this wonderful anecdote. Mahatma Jyotirao Phule was actually from the community of gardeners. He was a Mali, and he was working for the Peshwa, who was so happy with his gardens that he gave him a whole, 5 bighas of land. And then he began to grow flowers. And today, the Mahatma Phule market, which we all know in the city of Mumbai, is a Crawford market, is named after him. Imagine he was a gardener. But why I'm really recognizing him today is because he really built the first girls' school, which was for the low caste girls, and then spread the knowledge across the whole of Western India. And I think those of us who live here, we owe that to him, that we are all open, we are free, we can be educated, we can go to schools, and I can go to Harvard, and I can go around the whole world knowing that my knowledge is useful. I think we owe to this man who was just a gardener. He was a Mali. So I think gardens have a much longer history in our culture. I think cooking is the other great cultural aspect. And I have to say this again, my mother, I call her Annapurna. She always said, pour love into the recipe, because nutrition helps to meet humanitarian goals. Health, wellness, and nutrition go together. And she would always say that no one should go from your house hungry. They should always be given a meal, and then even if they were the smallest person, a postman, a delivery boy, give him something to eat and then send him on his way. So I learned those things. I didn't realize that these were centuries old part of Indian culture, where you would always feed the hungry and you would give water to the thirsty, something so important in all our culture. So this love for gatherings I had even when my children were young. And the gatherings were not just parties. We tried to think about all the people who come home and how can you pour love and affection in everything that you do, and how can you make it a unique experience for them. And many of you, I see old friends here, and they've been to my home, and you will experience that feeling, that love and affection when you come and have a meal. I wrote a book on it actually with the famous author Tarla Dalal, the late Tarla Dalal. It was called Eat Your Way to Good Health, and it explored some of the nutrition beliefs of good health. I think women have both the strength and compassion to be a leader. And it is not a coincidence that some of the most successful people in COVID-19 management have been women leaders. You talk about Angela Merkel, you talk about the Prime Minister of New Zealand, you talk about the lady in Kerala who's beaten COVID. Everywhere you will see that women leaders have strength and compassion, and they are able to lead very well. So being the most powerful woman was another very fantastic experience. I met so many women, from the banking fraternity, medical fraternity, and others who were selected to be the most powerful women. And because of that, I think I met every leader in the whole world. I think it is just, my good luck, I would say, a blessing that I was able to meet leaders from around the world. Reaching for the stars together is something that my husband Ajay and I do, that everything we do, we live these values. We believe that a life should be full of principles, that a life should be full of loving kindness and compassion. We should have Gyan Karma Bhakti in everything that we do. And we try to reach for the stars in a very inclusive way. So I want to switch to the pandemic, because that I think is my Swadharma. And as I was saying earlier, that every week this presentation has changed. I made it to other industry forums, but it has changed every week. And it is such a fast moving field that I thought I would give you a curated version of what I think is going to be the answer to rebooting the economy, which is on top of everybody's mind who is on this chat. If you look at the pictures of the pandemic in 1918, which is a century ago, but the principles haven't changed. The idea of staying at home, the idea of quarantining, the idea of wearing masks, the idea of running hospitals to even protect the children, to have respirators. So the principles for a century have not changed. And here we are trying to reinvent them. But what has changed is how quickly the science is moving to beat the pandemic. One of the worst things about the pandemic, and the reason why it's so nasty, is because it spreads even before there are any symptoms. You see the left side of this chart, you will see where this big corona thing is. That's where it spreads asymptomatic. You don't even have any symptoms. You don't even know whether you are suffering. And that is the worst part of this disease, because that makes it very easy to spread. So India has been lucky, maybe because of the BCG vaccine that we give our children. We have some level of immunity. The polio vaccine and others are given at birth. And so India's low mortality rate may be because of the vaccines that we give our children at birth. What has been the differentiator for success is good leadership. Today, 66% of our posts are vacant in the public health department, 41% in medical services. But Kerala contained COVID in 100 days. And why is this? Simply because this lady here was the health minister, and she beat COVID in 100 days and contained it in Kerala. So leadership, whether it's Angela Merkel, whether Prime Minister of New Zealand, I think these ladies really make strength and compassion and leadership really count during this crisis. My colleague at Harvard, Mark Lipsitch, said that this is not some magic which is going to go away when they ease the lockdown. In fact, it's going to be like this, like little waves of the ocean. It'll continue till 2022. So there are going to be, hills and valleys, and even peaks when you have bad seasons like the fall in the US or the cold and dry season in North India. And so this is not just going to magically go away as soon as lockdown eases. So what's the regimen then for reopening the economy? And there are big 4 pillars: hygiene, distancing, screening, and masks. The 5th element is something that we should never forget, and that is culture. How do we change the culture of our people? Even when we ease the lockdown a little bit, people are walking on the sea face here, just opposite my home, or in the gardens, all without masks. They're going to markets without masks. And so how do we change this culture? How do we tell people that it protects so much? And so changing the culture, changing the behavior is going to be a national effort. It is a fundamental moral imperative for our generation. Everybody on this chat, is your duty to explain the 5-point public health to everybody, to your family, to people at home, people whom you work with, and see how that you can be used. So this is like a cocktail. You can't skip one and not do the others. So if you skip one of the 5, hygiene measures, screening, distancing, masks, or culture, the treatment doesn't work. But when you take it together, they shut down the virus. Now, this idea came from my colleague Atul Gawande at the School of Public Health. He's at the Harvard Medical School. He's written a famous book on checklists. And he said that there are 75,000 doctors at Brigham, and the transmission rate is very low because they follow this 5-step program very rigorously. So one of the first is to look at all the symptoms. We know that it's not just fever today and sinuses and cold and cough. It could be chills, it could be fatigue, it could even be diarrhea, it could be headache. And so this disease is quite a nasty one. It may affect many systems, and you have to be very, very careful about that. Hygiene makes a big difference. If you wash your hands 10 times a day, the frequency makes a difference. If you wash them 10 times a day, the transmission is about, the lack of transmission is 97%, or the protection is 97%. If you wash it 5 times a day, the transmission rate is about 45%. So this idea of 10 times a day, if you can count starting in the morning, before and after you eat food, before and after you go to the bathroom, before and after you meet 3 people at work or at home, remember to wash your hands. So simple, but it stops transmission immediately. Social distancing, now we know the 6-foot rule, keeping away, it is very hard. You feel that when you are with a family member, you know, it's quite safe. When you are with people at work and you've known for years, it's quite safe. When you meet relatives, it's quite safe, but it isn't. And that is where you have to be extremely careful that even if you meet 3 people, keep your distance and also remember to wash your hands. One of the things about auditoriums and closed spaces, they found in Washington, where there was a choir and people were singing loudly, and at least 30 people in the audience got COVID. Now, you all know the story of Amitabh Bachchan and Abhishek Bachchan, who went to a dubbing studio. It's the same principle. It's a closed, poorly ventilated room, and you speak and sing loudly. It is a sure place to do transmission. There is today overwhelming evidence of the benefit of mandatory masks. If you combine distancing with masks, this is source control. And this stops from taking away all the droplets. So how effective is it? Last month, a study in Nature said if it's worn properly, and many people wear it below the nose, people will just put it on the neck, you know, they don't wear it properly. And so again, explaining this idea of culture is really very important. So any mask will do, even a cotton double-layered one or a disposable one, even an N95 mask, especially when you're traveling at airports and when you're in high-risk places like markets, it's better to wear this kind of mask. Today's article from my colleague at the Harvard School of Public Health by Nico Pronk gives a very important number. He said between April 8th and May 15, 15 states in the US mandated the use of masks. That they said it's mandatory. Case numbers dropped steadily every 5 days. In contrast, in those states where masks were not mandated, like Florida and others, Arizona, the numbers climbed. Now, Goldman Sachs analysts said wearing a mask, and please see this number, could save $279 billion. And they could cut mortality into half. So this is so much the overwhelming evidence. This study came out just this morning, and I had to put it in my presentation because it was so overwhelming, the data. So changing the culture is arguably the most difficult. Now I have housekeeping people working in my workplace. When I'm not looking, they'll put the mask down, they'll huddle and they'll gossip. But how do you change the culture and tell them how important it is? Everyone believes in safety and freedom. Keep me safe, but leave me alone. In contrast, what you need is a culture of the operating room. It is never wanting to be the one to make someone else sick. That's the culture we have as doctors and in the operating room. And changing this culture to what is creating a lower transmission. I firmly believe, friends, that drug treatments are going to come much earlier than vaccines. And these drug treatments, the reason I'm saying that on the left, you see this chart. So 1,800 trials are going on together. And today I was talking to one of the hospital heads here. They said, patients are so aware of all these. They come with 5 different drugs. They bring it to the hospital and tell the doctor, now you can use all these. And sometimes they want to use all 5. So, treatments are coming much, much faster than vaccines. What is a killer in COVID is what is called the cytokine storm. It's a place where the body kind of turns on itself and it creates this huge tsunami of inflammation. And handling this is something that everybody is looking for, the holy grail. In fact, one of my clinical trials is looking at just this area for one of our drugs, and we are going to start trials in a Bombay municipal hospital soon. So in the last 1 week, and that's why I say this this presentation changes every week. 5 drugs got approved: dexamethasone, favipiravir, remdesivir, tocilizumab. It's just amazing. And even the BCG vaccine, which I talked about earlier, even that people want to use to give human beings, even in adult stages, though there's not much evidence for it. You have to give it at birth and not when you're an adult. So reopening Wuhan were the 5 big ideas, 5 weapons: social distancing, contact tracing, testing, isolation, and treatment. Testing has become so confusing, even the doctors don't know which one to use when. And in my doctors group, we are all debating and talking about how to use antibody tests, antigen tests, PCR tests, and which one to use when, and which ones are positive, why there's so many false negatives, and so on. Now, everybody thinks that this is a very unique disease. It came from Wuhan. And yes, the question is always asked, is this man-made or is this possibly, just natural? But we know that zoonosis has occurred before. And more than 100 diseases are what is called zoonosis, when something jumps between an animal and human beings. So just to mention 2, which you all may have encountered: swine flu and bird flu. And so now scientists are saying, how do we predict the next pandemic and how do we survive that? One of the sad things about the crisis in India was, of course, the migrant crisis. And therefore, I think that we need to have a food policy where we don't have to go searching for hungry people. Remember, I said that it's an important part of our culture that we should always feed the hungry. And so we must know where our food stocks are and how quickly they must be deployed. And the other thing, of course, is mental health of young people. I was talking to a university in Delhi and saw the large number of questions about mental health, about drug use, and so on, and how young people were so badly, sort of badly affected by COVID and staying at home. So what are the lessons of history? Are we better off as a dictatorship in making sure that everything happens like beautifully and on time? Are we better off as a democracy? And in the countries, we are seeing these experiments in many countries like Brazil, Russia, where it is a virtual dictatorship. You're seeing that they are much better off to be in a democracy. So I'm so glad we have Prime Minister Modi, who actually wore the mask before most other world leaders. And we are very proud that he did what scientists told him to do, rather than resisting it and making it a political battle. My colleague at Harvard, who is the president of Harvard University, said that it's the first time in human history where we have 4 crises together: the health crisis, the moral crisis, the financial crisis, and the leadership crisis, all together in 1-2 months. And that is, I think, the most amazing moment in human history where something like this has never happened. That, I think, has led to the flowering of innovation. Innovation in design, urban planning, architecture, not having too many people staying in the same place. There were pop-up hospitals. My husband is the chancellor of Anant University, and they made these beds out of cardboard. And they popped up 200 beds in a week. So I think these are the innovations which are happening even outside medicine. There are new ways of working in everything. My mother would always stress about, in these 2 days of 2 months, about making her mango pickle. And she said, oh, this is something that my children love. And I go every year, I go and buy my mangoes and I make this pickle. And this new way of making pickles is when I put all the chefs in PPEs and then made her chunda and her mango pickle. So there are going to be completely new ways of doing things, even as something as simple as making a pickle. Now, friends, we have really made a mistake. We have underinvested in healthcare. If you remember the time of independence, only 8% of healthcare was in private hands, and the rest, 92%, was public healthcare. Today, 75 years later, is completely changed. And 75% is private and only 25% is in public healthcare. Now, because of the lockdown, they shut off the whole private healthcare system. Doctors couldn't work, 150 doctors I have in my class sat at home. Their clinics, nobody came. Nobody looked at doctors, in small clinics, nursing homes, all shut. And when we shut this created a huge load on the public healthcare system. And what has happened when we have eased the lockdown and we have got these doctor entrepreneurs working again in a place like Dharavi, which is the world's largest slum, this army of GPs, this army of doctors helped Dharavi to beat COVID. 300 of them were the army. It wasn't the BMC, it wasn't the government. I think it was the doctor entrepreneurs who really helped to beat COVID. And that proves my point of what I was saying, that when you shut down 75% of the healthcare, you're going to get an unnatural burden on the public, waste public resources, when you can really open up and then get people to really do their job. Of course, everything is fine until you know somebody who's affected, a parent, a grandparent, a relative, and that's when all the stress starts. So as a set of 15 promises, we need to follow as part of COVID appropriate behaviors. And I'll share this presentation so you can see the details. But it is respecting doctors, not stoning them, giving them enough PPE. We don't send our soldiers to Siachen Glacier without protective equipment. We don't send them without guns. And so we need to give them proper equipment, proper respect. People who've recovered from COVID, not treat them with a stigma, because they have actually recovered and they can't transmit anymore after their quarantine is over, and so on. So I think redoing and rejigging the culture of COVID is going to be part of the national talk and the national discussion. So living through this long wait in Mumbai, we're still under lockdown, and in many places it's opening up slowly. And as Anthony Fauci said today, that you must actually open very gradually and not suddenly, so that you have to go back again. Unfortunately, in many cities and countries around the world, there's what is called the second wave. And the coronavirus is just waiting for us to kind of open the lockdown and magically everything will go away, and not paying attention to the 5 public health principles. And that you have to be careful, as I was explaining earlier, right to 2022. One of the big discussions is about Chinese goods. We are dependent on medicines for APIs in particular with China. And as Minister Piyush Goyal said, it is not about closing doors. It is about opening doors for India, so that India then becomes a central part of a global supply chain. And it's our best opportunity to do that today. Having a pandemic proofing planet, I think, is going to be the next wave of science. We have to predict the next pandemic. We have to proof us, and we have to know how to deal with it. So doing small changes, just for example, this innovation, which is a UV light, which is portable, and it goes from room to room. Remember that UV light you can't use in the presence of human beings. You can put it in a room and have a long cable by which you can switch it on. And that cleans up some of the surfaces, the high touch surfaces that you can see. And I use this in big buildings, I use this in operation theaters and hospitals, and that it just is mobile. And this is a completely Indian innovation. And I think that is going to be seen more and more. So making small changes in your life to beat the COVID is really quite vital. I strongly believe that there will be lower transmission after lockdown, as is seen in many countries around the world, simply because of the thing that I explained, that will start up the private healthcare. You can go see your doctor, which you've not been going for minor diseases. And then some of these just pile up, especially in cancer patients. And we really don't need to have so much human suffering. So I want to conclude by just telling you what we've been doing in the foundation, because that is something that is acting across the world and indeed in India as well. We work in education, we work in leadership of healthcare, and we work in cleaning up water. So as I was explaining, the first thing we did was we can't have people hungry. If you remember the lessons of the Bengal famine, the British lost their rule in India because the whole state was under famine. We never want that to happen again. And therefore, using our food stocks and providing cooked goods and kits was something that we did first. And providing food for the hungry across the country was the first thing that we tried to do. The second was using technology and using digital tracing, contact tracing in faraway places like Assam or places where there were no medical facilities. And that really helped to contain the infection. And in very faraway places, maternal and infant mortality plays a big part. And if the mother cannot get to a hospital, we have very good chances of mortality. And so we try to do this to protect the children who were born in these 3 months. One of the things that I'm most proud of, and here's where I feel that if you don't need money to do everything, is a completely free way of getting volunteers. We had 35,000 volunteers who worked with Niti Aayog and in a campaign with the Piramal Foundation to Surakshit Dada Dadi Nana Nani Abhiyan in the poorest districts of India, 115 aspirational districts. And they used to call up all the old people, ask them and tell them, just to call and say, we care. And just to say where to go in case they were sick. And those very simple things, it's completely a voluntary effort. And it is so nice that this has taken lakhs of calls and is done completely free of charge. One of the things, and while we are all in our homes and we are in front of computers and we actually like staying at home because we don't have to go to parties and weddings and things like that. The flip side is the loss of education for the girl child. I think we will lose girls in schools and the income is low, it is always goes towards putting the boy back in school. And so we are making a special effort to make sure that the girl child is not lost. And we use phones and we use communication, IT communication to make sure that they're still in school. And because of all this, the most backward areas are doing well in containing the infection and is well in containing the mortality in senior citizens. And lastly, our water NGO has cleaned nearly 2 crore liters of water in ATMs. It's like automatic teller machines for water rather than money. And you don't even have to touch it and you get clean drinking water. And that has helped contain infection across many places in India. So I think Amir Khan would have said, we'll wait for the day when we'll all meet again. We'll wait for a day when we can all physically gather together. And we'll all say, all is well, all is well. And we'll be able to reboot the economy once again. And I feel that the doctor straining to make it in the upward U will be a central figure. So I want to just say it is all about leadership. Good leadership is differentiated. And meeting the coronavirus, I sort of explained all this. Just before I leave, I wanted to say that in this week, I've done an 8-session with Father Joe, and I realized that so many people had mental health problems and that meditation was going to help to give resilience and to give hope. And if any of you want to join in, there's still 4 more lectures. Please send me your email and phone number and name, and I will add you to a recording of meditation talks. Father Joe was the senior most student of BKS Iyengar, and he uses Mother Teresa's example of giving compassion and care to people. So to summarize, I want to just say what to kind of summarize of what I said, using knowledge, action, care, to do well and to do good, to remember to be creative, to be compassionate, use the arts, use science, use partnership, to be loving and joyful in everything you do, to have strength, to have reflection on yourself, because that's the most important knowledge of all, and to look after your own health and then look after the health of your family. So thank you very much for allowing me to give you the 2 parts of how I do things and how I think my Swadharma to give you what can be done in COVID to reboot the economy.
Thank you. It was the most thought-provoking and a very well-presented webinar. It was indeed a very enlightening presentation. We appreciate you making time in your busy schedule to speak to our members, Swatiji. We have a few members who are very keen to ask a couple of questions, Swatiji. With your permission, could we take up a few of them?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So the first question is from our Senior Vice Chairperson, Radhika Gupta from Ludhiana. Over to you, Radhika.
Good evening, Swatiji, Janvi and my dear Flow fraternity. Swatiji, I must say, you have such infectious smile and enthusiasm that it's been a privilege and a humbling experience to hear your story today. So my question to you is, you are known for many years to follow the values of Bhagavad Gita, Gyan, Karma, and Bhakti in your life and work. You have literally walked the talk when it comes to your values. Even your company logo is the Gyan Mudra, the symbol of universal knowledge. So Swatiji, please tell us, what is your mantra for the modern woman? What should they focus the most in their lives? Values, ethics, knowledge, and skill.
Yeah, so I feel these values which are written in the Gita are timeless. They were written 6,000 years ago, and they haven't changed. That is, they are universal, and they are like the lodestone or the North Star, the Dhruv Tara, where you can go by using all the three values, Gyan, Karma, Bhakti, and use that in everything, in life, in work, and the way you do things. And I feel that they haven't been modernized, so to speak. I think they're still valid. And it's amazing to me that women can use them most of all to know and to spread the idea of knowledge and then use it. I was so grateful to Mahatma Phule for educating that first girl child. And today we are all very happy that we can go to college, we can go to school very freely. And this was not about modernity. This was a very ancient skill of that knowledge must be equally given to every person.
Thank you so
I strongly believe that you can still use these three values.
Thank you so much.
Now we have the current chairperson of Lucknow, Pooja Garg. Pooja, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Swatiji. Your presentation was so inspiring and so informative. Thank you. My question to you is that even as a lay woman, whenever I have traveled abroad and seen Indian artwork and antiques displayed at museums such as the Tower of London, which houses the Kohinoor, the Louvre, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art, I felt a tug at my heartstrings. What was the driving force to bring home pieces symbolic of Indian syncretic traditions which laid the foundation of the Piramal Museum? Please share your vision behind promoting art in India.
Yeah, thank you. During independence, just after independence, there was this new avant-garde of artists who didn't want to paint the way the British taught them to. They thought about painting the way India should be displayed. Just behind me is one of those artists called Akbar Padamsee. And he and a few others, maybe 10, 15 of them, form what is called the Progressive Artist Group. And I decided to bring back these paintings from all over the world to come back to India, because they were given, when these artists went abroad, they stayed in Paris or Italy and they gave it to people at maybe 5,000 rupees. And there they stayed for many years. And I thought, why not bring it back to India, and why not use it as a display of what the new India was and how we can continuously think about the new India. And I'm so glad that this forms the fulcrum of our collection. We also have other parts, which is my favorite, is miniatures which came from Persia, just showing that, indeed, you think about India's history, we were the longest globalized country in the world, trading with from the Far East to Indonesia, to Cambodia, to the Arab countries, mathematics, literature, history, all was this free flow. In fact, Cleopatra is said to have worn the cotton textiles from India. So this was, I think we were the first globalized economy. And we were so good at it that on the sea beaches, we would have these bales of cloth. And our Indian merchants from Gujarat especially would sell and trade with these. They would never be, they would never go wrong on those numbers. They were very good at mathematics too.
Thank you, Swati ji. Now we have Preeti Sabu, the past chairperson of Jaipur, who wants to ask a question. Preeti ji.
Good evening, Swati ji.
Good evening.
It's always a pleasure to be in connect with you, and you look forever young and graceful. Be it 2016 or 2020, you are so much the same. Here comes my question. Currently, we are witnessing COVID-19 as a major pandemic. The next big challenge we all anticipate is water crisis. Piramal Foundation also nurtures Piramal Sarvajal and access to safe drinking water. How is your foundation working towards this? And how can we avoid or maybe delay this crisis?
So if you see, Preeti, I've been to our hometown near Jaipur, about 3 hours away.
Yeah.
And one day I flew from our village to the city of Mumbai. And I thought to myself, there are two Indias. There's one which doesn't have even drinking water or piped drinking water or piped water. Whereas here in Mumbai, we have, houses of water and we have clean water. We, have things like big bottles of Bisleri and we have even bottled water. So I thought, why are there two Indias? Why can't we do something in the villages where we can provide them clean drinking water? And I started first in Bagad, which is about 3 hours away from Jaipur, to have the first Sarvajal program there with the water ATM and the clean water program. And it was so successful. It dropped people's infections, they had stomach infections because of fluorosis, and so many things that we could prevent just by cleaning up the water. So now this is a nationwide effort. It is all over the country. In Guwahati, we even did it in the city, in Delhi, which is, and the fun incident on that was where the Delhi Jal project, the Queen Maximilia of the Netherlands came and drank the water from one of my ATMs. So I was quite thrilled to see that the Queen can drink, clean drinking water, what is there.
That's so fussy.
So but it was amazing how much this helps health. It's a very basic thing that we can clean water and then we can do this. So here we work with all foundations. Somebody wants to start this in their school, someone wants to start that in the villages. So if everybody does a little thing, that is a very nice way of helping humanity in that area. So we call it Sarvajal, water for all. And it's primarily in India's villages.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now we have Reena Kaushal, our Joint Secretary from Ludhiana. She has a question to ask. Reena, over to you.
Yeah, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am. The more I've learned about you, the more fascinated I am. As you mentioned, you call your mother as Annapurna, and you are also a fabulous cook and fond of a Tibetan cuisine. Please, can we hear something about it?
Yeah, sure. She is right here. I want to just.
Oh, wow.
Mom, yeah, so Annapurna, I get all the positivity from her. She has been a cordon bleu chef. She studied when she was 75. And I went to Harvard to study, and she came with me, and she went to study at one of the Cambridge School of Culinary Art. And she was so good that instead of being a student, they made her into a teacher because she just knew how to do things. And she is a wonderful, wonderful chef. She has some really big secrets. One is that she will always pour love and affection into everything that she does, that she will make a menu which is of service to somebody else. And she will always try to preserve the sun. Like Rumi said, the sun rays go into pickles, and that becomes a ambrosia. And so she loves to use the sun in making everything that she does. One day she made a biscotti with roses which were dried by sunlight, Rumi's recipe actually. And then they became crystallized roses and they went into biscotti. So what happened was when people ate that, said, what is this? Where does this come from? And the answer is the sunlight. So she has a few secret things like that. I call her Annapurna. She's my mother, but she has always been for the family, called Annapurna. They say your father is like Vishwanath and your mother is like Annapurna.
So true. Thank you, ma'am.
May now invite Shweta Jindal, our editor, to take up our next question, please. Shweta, over to you.
Thank you, Mannat Bhavi. Good evening, Swati ji. It is indeed an honor to listen to you. You're a powerhouse of talent. And trust me, writing about you, we were falling short of paper, your achievements. My question to you is, contesting for the member of the Board of Overseas People for Harvard, you were told that nobody from India had ever won. Ex-US President Barack Obama and Robert Kennedy had lost when they stood for the same elections. However, you won and became the board member and also served as the dean's advisor to Harvard Business School and Public Health. How was your feeling?
So the Harvard board is 350 years old. It's not only a century, 3 centuries. Yes. And so when the president of Harvard, she was a lady who came to India, and she invited me to stand for the election. And this election was very peculiar. You cannot canvass. You can't tell anyone to vote for you. You can't say, I'm Indian, please vote for me. And you have only 250 words to describe your work. And then you submit it, and then they vote or not vote. So I was pretty convinced that they would not vote for me because, this is the great country of America. There are so many talented people. Here I'm the small Indian woman who, so I was very convinced that nobody would not have won. But I said, I'm an illustrious company. I don't mind being in the same company as Barack Obama and Robert Kennedy because they lost. So it's okay if I lose. Mm-hmm. And so I was quite amused that I did win. And for the last 6 years, I was on the board of overseers. It was the most astounding experience because it is not just about my own field, which is medicine or public health. I learned about the arts, I learned about music, I learned about history, I learned about the economy, I learned maybe 100 things. It is like being a kid in a candy shop. There's so many things to learn at Harvard and meet so many bright people. There's sometimes a person sitting next to you would be the lead author in New York Times, one of your fraternity, Nick Kristof, or one would be a judge in the Supreme Court of the US, or one would, it was just, you're just with such, I would say, knowledgeable people that it is almost a given that you would learn even just sitting next to them and talking to them. So it was one of the most wonderful experiences of my life. I still continue to be on the Global Advisory Council. And just last week when we had the meeting, I told the president that you are a global university, you can't forget India. I know that America was so involved in its own self, in its own problems in COVID, that they completely forgot that there are many other countries who depend on the university for its knowledge. And so they pivoted and now they've really made it into a global council. So we try and do little things to make sure that India is center stage and we get the help.
Thank you, Swati. Thank you.
So we just have the last one, Swati ji, and I think you know her. We have Shriya Sabu wants to ask a question. Shriya, over to you.
Hi, Shreya ji.
Hi, Swati Ben, Pranam. Thank you for being here with us and explaining everything with so much ease, which was so outside our caliber to have understood otherwise. Thank you so much for this beautiful presentation. Also, I've been wondering what's, all the time fueling up your creativity, even during the COVID. Have you also discovered your new creative genius during the COVID? Though we have given up after 1-2 months of it, but you still look so smiling, fresh, and still full of energy. What's the mantra for that?
Yeah, so I did some real learning things in COVID. As I explained, I wrote my clinical trial for a drug which would help COVID, which was just delving into the science so deeply and understanding this very nasty virus. And so we are near to the end of it. I hope and pray that we can find a new treatment. And then I did something quite interesting. Everything that I do, I try to do with the idea of service. I know that people really were sad in this COVID crisis. They were in small homes, they're crowded people, in places. And so how do you bring hope and resilience? So every Sunday I would do a lecture from ancient history, from the Vedas or from even the Mughal Empire or the time that Gandhiji fought the British, where things looked as bleak as it does today. We had the plague, we had the Bengal famine, we had wars at all the time. People would just die every second. So in the past too, Indian whole cycles of civilization has faced crisis, and every time they have come out. Today, India is the only civilization which is 6,000 years old. You think about Egypt, it's not there. You think about Greece, it's not there. But India has revived. India has cycled. India has been resilient. And I thought, how do I awaken this sort of resilient approach? And then every Sunday I would have this lecture. And then I had this 8-day center of meditation. Jaffer, you have to look inward, and then you have to be resilient and strong, especially women who have to cope with everything at home, at work, and children, and to be resilient and to be and treat people with loving kindness all the time. And I think that was what drove me to do all these things in COVID times. And I went back to school, I studied, I'm now reading and writing, like doing homework, which I've never done in the last maybe decade. But it's helping me to keep me alive and the brain working. So yeah, that's what I try to do this 3 months.
Great to learn that. I hope we can do a bit of that.
We could go on and on, but due to paucity of time, may I now invite our very able President Janvi ji to give her concluding remarks. Janvi ji, over to you, please.
Yes, sorry about that. I was muted by the host. Can you see me now?
Yes, Jan.
Right. Can everyone see me now? Swati ji?
Yes.
I want to, there's so many takeaways for us from this amazing interaction with you. Besides the great things you do in the world of medicine and knowledge and education, you've given us so many things to think about: the love, the compassion, the learning that you're doing day in and day out. It's something that all of us should really learn to imbibe. And I want to tell you here that from Flow, we have tried this year to adopt a village each. So all our 17 chapters have been asked and are looking towards adopting a village each, where we are trying to give them life skills training and general awareness, health, COVID times, especially the psychosocial counseling that you've also talked about, caring for people, working on that, on the mental health. That is an important component. We are working on that and trying to skill women who have come in from the returning migrants as well, who've gone back to the villages. So we have a responsibility from FLOW and trying to do our bit. And it was fascinating to learn about the work that you are doing, your organization, the Piramal Foundation, is doing on the ground. And I look for an opportunity of how you can help us partner in these centers that we come from. I'm from the FLOW Northeast chapter. You have mentioned Guwahati, Assam, and the other centers in the country that you're working in. I will like to come to you and see if it be a possibility for Piramal Foundation. Please work with FLOW and do our bit for the nation, as you and your family and your company has been doing over the years. So we look forward to that. And I'm not sure if I am still being seen by you, but there's another small note I'd like to leave with you, is that
I think some network glitch. Janvi ji, are you still there? Janvi ji? I think, sorry for that. Could I invite our Senior Vice President to propose the vote of thanks, Ujjwala ji?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of FLOW, I would like to thank Dr. Swati Piramal, Vice Chairperson, Piramal Group, for being with us today. You are truly a dreamer, an achiever, an icon of inspiration for women around the world. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to interact with you and be inspired. Thank you, Mannat Kothari, Chairperson Ludhiana chapter, for initiating this session. My sincere to all the past, present, and governing body members for joining us today. A big thank you to all the viewers who has joined us from across different parts of the country. Thank you. Namaste.
We have Janvi ji. Yeah, we have Janvi.
Yes.
Janvi ji wanted to add something and we
Yes,
lost you there. Please continue.
Dr. Piramal, I'm not sure if you could hear me that time, but I just wanted to leave another note with you that I believe you have a passion for floral teas. You like trying various blends and flavors, and